When you look at the party of Kamala Harris, for example, she is anti-freedom, she is pro-censorship, she is pro-open borders, and she is pro-war. Without even pretending to care about peace, as President Trump talked about, she has shamelessly embraced the endorsement and support of warmongers like Dick Cheney and Liz Cheney and others who care more about power and feeding the military-industrial complex than they care about you, the American people.
For weeks, I've been telling you that the Republicans have the momentum. And now, a former candidate to be the Democratic presidential nominee, Tulsi Gabbard, has endorsed Donald Trump and joined the Republican Party. If that wasn't bad enough, Kamala Harris also chose to skip the annual Al Smith dinner. So, New York elites spent the night laughing at her, along with Donald Trump. All this lends me to believe that it's looking like a Donald Trump win in November. I'll get into all that and more. I'm Rachel Parker, and you're watching Rachel and the Republic. Hey everyone, I'm Rachel Parker. Welcome back to Rachel and the Republic. Today I'll be giving you the latest updates to the Republican campaign trail in the US election cycle. And we'll also talk about what I perceive to be a very big mistake from Democratic presidential nominee Kamala Harris in the past few days. So let's start out with this endorsement from Tulsi Gabbard. We know that Tulsi Gabbard hasn't been a big fan of the Democrats lately. She left the party after about 20 years to sit as an independent around 2020. And in recent weeks, we've seen her out campaigning for Donald Trump. She also appeared on stage alongside Tucker Carlson and RFK Jr. during a Tucker Carlson live event. And she's become very popular in Republican circles. Why? Well, one of the things that's very important to Tulsi Gabbard is a message of peace. You heard it a little bit in the opening there. She talks about how Kamala Harris and the Democrats have become the party of war. She even refers to former Vice President Dick Cheney as a warmonger, as an individual who wants to keep the United States in a constant conflict to bolster what is being called the industrial military complex. So when we talk about America, we all know they spend a ton of money on their military. And in fact, in Canada, we sort of rely on that. We take advantage on that. Our government does not spend as much on the military as it should. It doesn't even meet its NATO targets, we've come under fire from our allies from that. Probably because the prime minister's too busy spending that money on tampons for men or something like that. And certainly we hope that if we have a conservative government like it's looking in the next year, we can meet those NATO targets, because I do believe it is important for us as an ally to G7 nations to be meeting our basic requirements. And that's not really a partisan talking point. I think that's something that across all party lines, people generally agree that we should be meeting our NATO commitments. But in the United States, they love their military. The United States is sort of seen as a leader in the free world. It's seen as a power. And so, they are quick to go into other countries and in some cases to offer aid, but in some cases, they actually come and it results in conflict. And this is something that Tulsi Gabbard feels very strongly about. She just wants to seek peaceful resolutions as much as possible. This is something that Donald Trump was actually lauded for. He was a president that was very peaceful. If you think about what the world was like when Donald Trump was president, things were very peaceful. And I know a lot of people think about that now because it so often feels like we're on the brink of World War III with what's going on in the Middle East right now. And when we look at Israel and all the conflicts they're having with their surrounding neighbors, that's always been, a hotbed for potential issues. Israel has always been in a high conflict region, and they've been able to somehow keep, an appearance of peace in the past. Obviously, there's always been conflict between the Palestinian territories in Israel, but now that is continuing to escalate. And I think there's a lot of fear from people in America that Americans are going to get dragged into this conflict and that American men are going to be sent overseas to fight and to die. And Americans looking at this are not interested any longer in getting dragged into these foreign conflicts. They want to have peace. They want their men to stay home. You have to remember in the United States, men of fighting age can be drafted into the military in certain cases. So they don't even have a choice. They would be simply drafted into military and they would have to go fight overseas. So Tulsi Gabbard is looking at Donald Trump and she's comparing what it was like when he was president and noticing how he desired peace and how things were so peaceful under him and his presidency compared to Kamala Harris. And we don't even have to say what it would be like under Kamala Harris. We know what it's like under Kamala Harris because she's the vice president now and this is her administration. And we've seen conflict escalating all around the world under her leadership and Joe Biden's leadership as well. And so, Tulsi Gabbard, that is something she feels very strongly about. And she was a Democrat, as I mentioned, for 20 years. She left to sit as an independent. And now in that first clip that you hear, she's talking about how the Democrats have become the party of war and they are supported by warmongers like Dick Cheney. And she gives that as a reason for her endorsement of Donald Trump. And then later she goes into the fact that she'll be joining the Republican Party. I think that this is a very strong, not only endorsement, but it's a very strong move for the Republicans because this message of peace is so pertinent in the world and in America right now. Everyone is, Americans, they're not interested in getting into these international conflicts. They're not interested in having their men sent overseas. And so this message of peace and we want to bring peace and prosperity back to the United States. We don't want you at home having to be worried about getting dragged into a conflict in Israel. I think that rings really strongly with Trump's base and with more Americans writ large. Like you have to remember, Tulsi Gabbard was a Democrat for 20 years. This is not a move that someone makes very lightly. You're likely going to lose a lot of friends and potentially even some family on your way out the door. If you remember when RFK Jr. gave his endorsement for Donald Trump, his family came out and lambasted him publicly. Friends began being very critical of him. You saw all these bizarre stories in the media being leaked about him. So these are very difficult decisions to make. I don't think we should forget about that, how hard it is to change your mind on something as strongly as politics. In many ways, politics has become the new religion, and people believe so strongly in their political ideology that they're even willing to cut off their family or publicly try to shame their family in some cases. Personally, I think it's a very vile thing to do. I don't think you should speak ill about your family. Maybe if they're like a mass murder, okay, then maybe you might have to make a comment about that. But because your family has different political ideology than you, it's not a reason to come out and to attempt to shame them in the media. And when we look at some of the key Democrat figures that have joined the Republicans, this is what they have to deal with. So I think this is a very strong move for the Republicans because Tulsi has a big following. You can see why. She's so eloquent. She's such a great speaker. She's very, very attractive, easy to listen to, easy on the eyes, all the things. So here she is talking about how she'll be joining the Republican Party. Take a look at this first clip.
Because of my love for our country, and specifically because of the leadership that President Trump has brought to transform the Republican Party and bring it back to the party of the people and the party of peace, that I'm proud to stand here with you today, President Trump, and announce that I'm joining the Republican Party.
So that really is such a strong win for the Republicans. It even goes a step further than an endorsement in saying that, I believe that Donald Trump is the best candidate for the presidency of the United States of America. It goes a step further than that because she's so convicted in her beliefs that Donald Trump is the best candidate that she's actually willing to let him lead her. She is willing to be a member and potentially even a candidate for the Republican Party and to have Donald Trump lead that party. That is a very strong indication that she believes in his candidacy because she's willing to be led by him. So I think this is a great move, as I mentioned, for the Democrats. I think this will play really strongly with their base, but also with some undecided voters in the middle. So that is just one of the reasons why I said currently, based on what we know right now, based on where we're at in the election cycle, things can change very quickly, as you know. I actually kind of got the sense that the Republicans were not doing too well, that the Democrats had the momentum up until Trump went back to Butler, Pennsylvania with Elon Musk. That was when I told you all I felt a shift in the campaign. And at this point, I'm feeling like there's a very strong potential for it to be a Republican win in November. Certainly very excited to cover that election night. I'm just wondering when we're even going to know the results of the election because it's become so normal. I talked about this on the Rachel Parker show yesterday. It's just becoming so normalized that voters can't expect to know the result of an election within a timely manner. It used to be you'd have election day and you would know the results by election night. But with the process of mail-in ballots that we're allowing, with some of the vote tabulators, which count votes that were cast in other, you might be able to vote somewhere that's not like your home riding. It's just taking forever for people to be able to tally the votes. And so, I think that's causing a big trust in the democratic process. And top commentators that I've been listening to, like Megyn Kelly, have said, we don't actually know when we're going to know the results of the US election. So that's very concerning. And it's also just frustrating for me as a journalist to try to cover, and for all of you viewers at home who want to know the results and you want to know what's happening. Okay, let's move into another big thing that happened in the past 2 days. I'm sure you guys caught some of this online. The Al Smith dinner, it's a charity dinner for Catholic charities that help children in New York. It's a very prestigious dinner. Donald Trump went to that dinner, and he honestly, he hit it out of the park. It was, I tend to find Donald Trump to just be like a very funny figure. Like, I don't know what it is about him. Just the way he holds himself, I just always get a kick out of him. I'm sure I've shared that with you guys before. He's just so funny to me. He's always doing funny mannerisms. He makes these kind of off the cuff remarks. It's just sort of I think it tends to happen when someone's very comfortable with themselves and they're very confident. He can have sort of a self-deprecating humor. And so he hit it out of the park at the Al Smith dinner. I compiled what I thought were his best moments of the night for you guys to watch. So here's Donald Trump at the Al Smith dinner, his best moments of the night, in my opinion.
Halls that I'm supposed to tell a few self-deprecating jokes this evening. So here it goes. Nope, I've got nothing. I've got nothing. There's nothing to say. I guess I just don't see the point of taking shots at myself when other people have been shooting at me for a hell of a long time, and they shoot hard. But I must say I was shocked when I heard that Kamala was skipping the Al Smith dinner. I'd really hoped that she would come, because we can't get enough of hearing her beautiful laugh. She laughs like crazy. We would recognize it any place in this room, and Joe has almost disappeared from view. The only way he could be seen less is if he had a show on CNN. They had nothing. There's a group called White Dudes for Harris. Have you seen this? White Dudes for Harris. Anybody know? Are some of you here? White Dudes for Harris? Doesn't sound like it. But I'm not worried about them at all, because their wives and their wives' lovers are all voting for me.
Okay, so definitely some of the best moments of the night, but go back, watch the full video. You will not be disappointed, I promise. It is worth the, I don't remember how long it was, 15, 20 minutes, but you'll get a kick out of it, no doubt about that. So for those of you who aren't super familiar, the Al Smith is an annual dinner. The major political candidates always show up to it. As I mentioned, it is a charity event. It raises money for Catholic charities. Probably an even worse look that Kamala Harris didn't attend, given that video the other week of Gretchen Whitmer appearing to be mocking the Lord's Supper, where she had someone place a Dorito in her mouth while she was on the knees. And the reason that people felt so strongly that Governor Whitmer was mocking Catholics is because Catholics actually, in some types of Catholics, receive the Lord's Supper on their knees. I'm Protestant. Typically, we will either go up to the front of the church to receive it, or we will simply receive it while seated in our pews. But if you're Catholic, you tend to go on your knees. So, the Dems already are not doing too well with the Catholics, given that pretty big gaffe from Governor Whitmer. And then Kamala Harris chose to skip this event. She did send a pre-recorded video. We're not going to play it today. It was utterly cringy, and I know you guys just don't want to see it at home. So we're going to focus on the Republican campaign today. But one of the reasons that it was so strange that Kamala Harris skipped this dinner is because that was actually the first time in nearly 4 decades that a major party presidential candidate skipped this dinner. So it's just, the candidates always go. That's just sort of one of those things. They always go. They always give their speech. And I felt that it was would have been sort of an easy opportunity for her because she could have pre-written out her speech, or I should say she could have had her staff pre-write out her comments. She wouldn't have been asked questions. She could have come totally prepared. And, we know that Kamala Harris tends not to be the best on her feet in interviews. She really struggles in an interview setting. But in situations where you can pre-write a speech, it seems like it would have been an easy win for her. As well, she could have poked fun at Donald Trump, and I feel like those clips tend to go viral. Some of the clips I've just shown you guys, as I mentioned, I'm sure you've seen them already because people love this type of political content just because it's something of a bit of a more lighthearted nature. Politicians often will address sort of like the elephant in the room of the campaigns that no one's talking about. They'll just sort of say, this awkward thing happened, and everyone's like, yep. And especially if you're able to laugh at yourself, then it can take potentially a moment in the campaign that was awkward or that was a bit of a miss for you. And if you're able to spin it later on and laugh at it, then that can play really, really well for you. And everyone can be like, okay, he actually recovered from that later on because he was able to laugh at it. This is something that Donald Trump has done very well in the past. You'll notice there he made that remark. I'm not going to make any self-deprecating remarks about myself because you guys are all doing it for me already. Everyone else is taking shots at me. And of course, that was a rather effective line because he was referring to his opponents, he was referring to the American press, and he was also talking literally about the shots that were fired. So had multiple meanings, and I think as an opening line, that did really well for him. And it was just such a missed opportunity for Kamala because it's not difficult to prepare these types of remarks at an event. I remember when I did the opening for Tucker Carlson when he was in Edmonton. I know some of you were at that event, and I actually announced that Danielle Smith was going to be coming on next. I basically opened for her, and I kind of just sat down and I was like, and the people that I was working with that were organizing the event were like, you really need to get the energy up in the crowd. So I was like, okay, well, I don't tend to have the loudest voice. I tend to be pretty monotone. I'm not really the person to come in fist pumping. I'm no tumult, so to speak, and to get the crowd going. But what I can do is I can probably come up with a few clever comments to make people laugh and to lift their spirits that way and to get a really good energy throughout the crowd. And that was not hard to do at all because you have all the material in the world to work with. You just need to look for some relevant political context and point to that. And people tend to get very excited. So that's what I did. It's really not hard to do this type of thing. And so I'm sure that even the Kamala Harris campaign, with all their idiocy, could have done a half decent job at presenting something at this event. Instead, they skipped it. That was pointed out by Donald Trump repeatedly. And he actually said in his speech, I didn't cut this part for you because I wanted to share it with you, that the last time a major party presidential candidate skipped this event was Walter Mondale's absence in 1984. Now, when they said Walter Mondale's name, I was like, who the heck is that? 1984 was well before I was born, to be fair. But maybe another reason why I wasn't sure who he was is because he was absolutely decimated in the election after skipping this dinner. He actually lost every state except for Minnesota, his home state. And that was in the election that was run by probably the most popular American president of all time, Ronald Reagan. So, Walter Mondale, his legacy did not carry on after skipping this dinner. So I think probably things are not boding well for Kamala Harris. The fact that she skipped this dinner shows really a lack of confidence in herself. And I think a lack of confidence in her campaign. And instead, she missed the dinner. Donald Trump and New York elites, who, by the way, when Donald Trump first went to this dinner back in 2016, he was not popular. They did not laugh at a lot of his jokes, and instead they booed him. And here they are, and he's a popular figure at these events. You can hear him laughing at their jokes. So even they know Kamala Harris is essentially screwed in this election. Okay, and I just really quickly wanted to touch on one last thing that happened in the Trump campaign this week. Take a look at this president working at a very popular fast food chain in the States.
Mr. President, you actually have worked at McDonald's now versus...
Now I have worked at McDonald's. I've now worked for 15 minutes more than Kamala.
Are you going to put this on your
I
resume?
never worked here.
Why would she lie about
15 minutes
something
more than
like that?
Kamala.
Will be put on...
So this was just kind of a fun moment from the president. You can catch a few other clips of that of him inside, frying up the French fries in the oil. A couple reasons this plays well for the president. One is because he genuinely does love McDonald's. I'm sure you've seen some photos of him at the White House surrounded by bags of McDonald's. You've read the reports about how he eats an insane amount of McDonald's. He loves to drink pop. And also, if you fly on Air Force One, the official meal that you're served is McDonald's. I do tend to feel a little bit bad for some of the reporters. I can't function off McDonald's. Like, I eat it maybe like 2 times a year, and the rest of the day is an absolute write-off. I'm in bed just sleeping it off because that food is absolutely toxic and it just destroys my body. I do actually have a bit of respect for people that can eat it and still function normally, because I'm just out. Tucker Carlson recently released the first few episodes of his documentary on Donald Trump. I would definitely recommend it. It's called The Art of the Surge, sort of a play on Donald Trump's book title, The Art of the Deal. And they cover the assassination attempt in it, of course, which I was at. And you can get sort of a different viewpoint because Tucker Carlson had staff that were right up close when it happened. And even for me watching it, I was like, oh, it was just a totally different scene right here close to where the shooting happened. I was very far back in the media pit, and people where I was tended to be a little bit more calm. But it was funny because Tucker Carlson, this network staff that were doing the documentary, they were on Air Force One with the president, and they were showing what the meal was after debate night. And of course, they were being served McDonald's. So Donald Trump really does love McDonald's. So that was sort of the one fun aspect of him being there. America loves McDonald's way more than Canada. We have Tim Hortons, although that has degraded significantly. I know fast food chain writ large has degraded, but Tim Hortons seems particularly bad these days. I actually just don't eat there anymore. I covered that fairly extensively yesterday on the Rachel Parker Show. So definitely go back and listen to that. And I'm sure most of you are going to be like in my comments, McDonald's, Tim Hortons sucks. We don't eat there anymore. I know those comments are coming, and I'm with you guys. If you still have good McDonald's food, maybe the specific employees at your local, I was Tim Hortons. If you still have good Tim Hortons food, maybe the specific employees at your Tim Hortons just care a little more and aren't serving raw food, but it's largely just pre-cooked and then packaged frozen and heated up nowadays. So quality super downgraded, but America still loves their McDonald's. I would say even more than Canadians love their Tim Hortons, especially in this particular context of the quality being so degraded. And so there was that fun moment. But then the best moment of that clip was you hear Trump say, I've worked at McDonald's for 15 minutes longer than Kamala Harris. And the joke there is that Kamala Harris has said she worked at McDonald's, and there's no evidence that that's been found of this. No one was able to find an example of her actually having worked at McDonald's. So again, you see sort of this campaign move from Donald Trump, and it had more than one reason to it. Just it's a fun, lighthearted thing to do. And also in another way, it's more personally poking fun at the Kamala Harris campaign. Of course, the media was trying to run cover for Kamala Harris. Some of the most ridiculous headlines in the days following. First, there was reports that the McDonald's stock was dropping. And then, of course, there was a report that there was an E. coli outbreak from some McDonald's food. So they were doing their best to sort of trying to shade Donald Trump and the excitement that his event at the McDonald's got. And the other more hilarious part of the story was there was actually some headlines, we'll throw one up for you, in the hours following this event, that the Donald Trump event at the McDonald's was staged. As if we didn't actually know that he didn't work there. I just thought he was running for president on the side. You know, I thought he spent maybe like 15 to 20 minutes a day doing that. And I thought he worked like he comes from his 8-hour shift at McDonald's, right? Like he's flipping burgers and oiling French fries all day. And then he just shows up at a campaign rally. That's what actually happened, right? Oh no, it was staged. Okay. As if we didn't all already know that, as if everything that happens in politics isn't essentially staged. When a president goes to, for example, when Trump goes to the border wall and holds an event there, is that not a staged event? Those people just wouldn't naturally happen to have been at the border wall. They go there to hold an event to say, hey, we're here at the border today. We're very concerned about the migrant crisis. We just learned that there's a caravan of 2,000 migrants coming towards this border. They're headed here right now. They should be here in about a week. And our border agents are telling us they don't have the resources they need. They're telling us that this would be stopped if the border wall was finished. That's a staged event. They go to a particular place to make a particular point. That's essentially what politics is. It's all staged events. Yes, of course, then there's the actual governing aspect of politics where you're passing legislation and policy. But all the other stuff is staged events to make points and to talk to people about relevant issues. We know that. I get that. You get that. That's not news to us. So the fact that some of these headlines were being written about stage events, I'm assuming there's maybe some political commentators in the States who are still getting up to speed about what exactly it is that politics is. All right, everyone, that's all we have time for today. You're not going to want to miss next week's episode. It's going to be pre-recorded at the True North Nation event in Calgary this weekend. There might still be a couple tickets left if you guys haven't gotten it yet. I'll be speaking there. My colleagues like Harrison Faulkner will be speaking. You guys are not going to want to miss. It's going to be a great event. I know there's going to be a lot of coverage on what's going on in Canada and Alberta, but I have a special presentation for you all about the US election. It will be content I have not covered on this show yet, and we're going to specifically be diving into the American election and some of the nefarious activities that are going on. Sometimes we talk about a stolen election, and today, I've given you all the reasons why I think the Trump campaign is leading, why the Democrats are scrambling with their ridiculous headlines about staged political events. And we're going to take a closer look at some of the nefarious things that are going on, specifically with voting in the United States. So that'll be happening live on Saturday in Calgary. But for those of you who are not in the area, are not able to make it, we are going to record it, and I will be sure to have it for you next week because I haven't covered that topic extensively. And, we all talk about stolen elections a lot, and I think the Democrats often accuse Trump of basically teeing up the election to say that it was stolen, to say, to say that if he loses, to say that the election was stolen. But there's already things going on right now with voting in the United States that are of concern, and I think it's important that you guys are armed with the facts. So when people talk about, Trump said the election was stolen, it's like, well, actually, there was some wrongdoing. There was some cases of people who voted that should not have been able to vote. There was some cases where certain states shut down voter registration during Trump rallies. So there has certainly been some untoward actions, and I think it's important that you guys know exactly what's going on. So I'll have that live on Saturday and then next week. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm Rachel Parker, and this is Rachel and the Republic.